Last week when I was here, I said I hated car wrecks in the forensics lecture. I hated car wrecks, and I told you why. Altered mental status is kind of the opposite. I kind of love those, and the reason is they're so easy to work up. It's just a cookbook recipe. It's an easy approach. You just follow the recipe and see what comes out. So that's what we're going to talk about is the different mnemonics I use and the different approaches to somebody with an altered mental status. There's a bunch of mnemonics involved. This one here, if you've got somebody who's actually able to talk the pain questions, PQR star. Have you ever seen that? It's a great mnemonic, especially if you've got somebody with chest pain. But anybody who comes in with a complaint of pain, the P stands for palliative and provocative. So what makes the pain better or worse? Let's say somebody with chest pain. What makes it better? What makes it worse? Q is the quality. Is it tight? Is it dull? R is radiation. Where does it radiate? Signs. S is signs and severity and associated symptoms. T is the time of onset. Then I added an AR, so it's PQR star. A is associated symptoms like nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath. And then R is risk factors for heart disease. It has nothing to do with altered mental status. Why? All right, so this is the approach and the attack for somebody who's in a coma. Now, when I say in a coma, I'm talking about anybody with altered mental status. They may be flat out, and you can't wake them up, versus somebody who's just acting weird, somebody who's just acting goofy. If they're just acting weird or goofy, you still got to approach them as if they're in a coma. The cookbook, the recipe is still the same. The way you approach them is key. The very first thing you got to do, if you've got somebody who's, the ambulance brings them in and says, man, he's unconscious, the very first thing you got to do is you got to prove it. Prove that they're unconscious. And the best way to do it, I think, one of the first things I'll do is I'll get right down into the patient's ears and say, open your eyes! Just as loud as I can. And frequently that's all it takes. Well, you don't have to yell. Now you're awake. And there's a whole lot of things we don't have to do now just because I yelled at them. If that doesn't work, then it's time to move on to noxious stimuli. So you want to do a sternal rub. Now, you don't want to take your knuckles and go like this because remember they got a wife or a husband, they got family who's around, and you're going to come off as a really bad character if you start hurting them. But it's so easy to do a sternal rub incognito. While you're listening, you can kind of bury a knuckle. When you're looking in the eyes with the pupils, everybody's focusing on the eyes, you can kind of reach over and dig in with your knuckles. So you got to do a sternal rub, and then you want to stimulate the left hand, the right hand. Usually it's the nail beds, you can squeeze their nail beds, and the same with the toes. And you're looking to see what their response is. Do they wake up? Do they withdraw from pain? Do they have decervant posturing? Do they have decorticate posturing? Do they have purposeful movement? All of those things are going to be recorded. But you have to be sure to do that. You have to try to wake them up, and then you have to do some noxious stimuli. And the reason we're doing the noxious stimuli is so we can get a Glasgow Coma scale. You guys have all heard of the Glasgow Coma scale. You probably don't have it memorized because it's kind of goofy. I put this on because I want you to remember there's no cows in Glasgow. It's the University of Glasgow in Scotland, but there's no C in there. There's no cows. It's Glasgow. I see a lot of students make that mistake. But Glasgow Coma scale, the best you can get is 15. The worst you can get is a 3. Remember, even a potato in the middle of the road is going to get a 3. The categories are divided up by eyes, verbal responses, and motor responses. Best you can get is 15. It would be nice if it was 5, 5, and 5. 5 for each one. But it's, you had to make it harder, so it's different. You can see eye opening. The best you can get is 4, verbal response, the best you can get is 5, and motor response, the best you can get is 6. That's how you end up with 15 as your best. So how do I remember it? The way I remember it is at the bottom there, eyes. There's 4 letters in eyes, so that's your 4 points. Talks is 5, there's 5 letters in talks, so there's my 5 points. And motors, motor activity, that's my 6-point category. If you know what the best you can get is, it's really easy to get in your mind and think backwards. So if you're going to go from motor response is 6 is obeys commands, then a 5 is localizes the pain, and a 4 is withdraws the pain, and 3 is flexion, and 2 is decervant, and 1 is none. And it's really easy to figure out how to count down. You just remember the best response is In eyes, it's 4, and then you go 3, 2, 1. Or in verbal, best response is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can just remember eyes for 4, talks for 5, and motors for 6. For a total of 15, remember 3 is the worst anybody can get. And then you approach the patient with your ABCs, where A is airway, B is breathing, C is circulation, D is disability, and E is exposure. The D for disability is really, you're trying to uncover any neurologic deficits. And that's where you're doing the sternal rub to see what happens, where they're going. That's when you do your painful stimuli to their nail beds to see what they're doing on the left hand, the right hand, the left foot, the right foot. The E for exposure is really critical. You really need to get these people naked. You need to get buck naked just like a trauma patient. You never know what you're going to find. You may find they're covered in fentanyl patches, or they've got stab wounds everywhere from a previous trauma. So you really need to get them exposed and get a good look at everything. Have something pop in there. All of this is done with C-spine. Remember, you got to protect the C-spine. You have to pretend that the C-spine is fractured. So you want to protect it, maintain inline control until you can prove that it's not. Do you know how to clear a C-spine? The way to clinically clear C-spine, if the patient's awake and talking, say it's a car wreck or something like that, you just come up there, and they're in a collar, typically. You tell them, okay, listen, I'm going to take off your collar, and I'm going to mash on your neck. You're basically going to go do midline tenderness. You're checking for midline tenderness. Stop me if it hurts, but don't move, okay? Okay. So then you just touch all the spinous processes all the way down to C-spine. And if they don't hurt at all, then you're halfway done. Now, and if they do hurt, then you put the collar back on and you go to imaging. If they don't hurt at all, the next step is to say, okay, as soon as I turn loose of your chin, I want you to pick your head up and put your chin on your chest. Stop if it hurts. Turn your head to the right or left, stop if it hurts. If they can do that, you don't need imaging, you're done. There's a caveat. The caveat is they can't be drunk, they can't be on drugs, they can't be stoned, and they can't have a distracting injury. So say it's a guy who's got a femur fracture. Maybe his femur fracture hurts so damn bad that he's not really paying attention to his neck. So if they have a distracting injury, you can't clear the C-spine clinically. Back to see what I was going to say. And as I was on the slide, I thought, ooh, be sure and say that. And then I can't remember. Oh, not really. Another way to identify if the brainstem and the cerebral cortex is working is with the cold caloric. So you guys familiar with the cold caloric stuff? You see a lot of those. We don't do it a lot, but sometimes we do it in the ER. You take cold water and you just squirt it in their ear. This is somebody who is comatose. You know what you're looking for when you do that? Everybody goes, oh yeah, but you know what you're looking for?
A cough?
What is it?
Do they cough?
It'll make them very nauseous. There's a mnemonic, it's called COWS, and it stands for cold, opposite, warm, the same. That means absolutely nothing until you hear my story. And some people do the test with warm water, but the question is, how warm did you get it? If you put it in a microwave, you could get it so hot that it's going to burn. So we just always do it with cold water. That's the deal. So you got a patient who is comatose. You don't think they're faking it. You think it's real. You're going to do cold caloric. So you'll take cold water, ice water. You can't get it too cold. Ice water, and you'll squirt it in their left ear. And frequently that's going to wake them up, and they're going to get really mad at you. You tell them to pay their bill on the way out. If they don't wake up and start heaving, then this is what you're looking for. So here's I can't believe I haven't told this story. So imagine the brainstem driving down the road. You ever heard this story? Okay, the brainstem is driving down the road. In one of my other lectures, I've got this as a slide. So the brainstem is in a Volkswagen driving down the road. A PA or a nurse practitioner or doctor comes in and squirts ice water in the right ear. Remember, the brainstem is dumb and stupid and primitive. Cold water goes in the right ear while he's driving down the road. What's he going to do? Slowly, he's going to look over. Who's putting ice water in my ear? Because that's what the brainstem does. It's stupid, primitive, it's slow. Who's putting water in my ear? The cerebral cortex smart and fast, says, get your eyes back on the road, because you don't want to crash. So that's a normal response, slowly looking towards the ice water and back. So that's the nystagmus you're looking for. And when they talk about the nystagmus, they're always talking about the fast component of the nystagmus. So you squirt water in somebody's right ear and they slowly go like that and come over. That's how their eyes flip, then that's normal. If you squirt cold water in their ear and it goes like that, it stays, brainstem's working, but the cerebral cortex is not functioning. You put water in their ears and nothing happens, brainstem ain't working either. It's a really good test. I think it's a great way to remember it. It's the only way I can remember it. So you're looking for the fast component of the nystagmus. So we talk about mnemonic counts. See, I get off on all these tangents and nothing to do with it. All right, I know I talked about this last week. When patients come in with altered mental status and trauma, this is the mnemonic I taught you guys last week. Oh my, I've lost the vital signs. And I won't go through that again. But, and it's very helpful. It's a very helpful mnemonic. Okay, if it's not trauma and it's drama, or it's medical, in here we refer to things either as trauma or drama. Drama is the medical things. Don't forget. You guys know what that is? This is an acronym for the things you don't want to forget. Where the D is dextrose, you want to be sure and give them some sugar, or check their finger stick blood sugar, make sure they're not hypoglycemic. The O is oxygen. If they're hypoxic, oxygen is going to help. The N is Narcan. If they've overdosed on opiates, you're not going to hurt anybody by giving them Narcan. You may wake them up and save them a huge bill. Because if you give Narcan and they wake up and say everything's fine, you don't have to go down any of the other roads. And the T is thiamine, in case they're in Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome if they're an alcoholic. The F stands for flumazenil, which is the generic name for romazicon. That's the trade name. So you can say don't forget or don't remember where the R stands for romazicon. That is the antidote for benzos. So if somebody's overdosed on benzos, you need to give them flumazenil or romazicon. The DONT, those first four, you can give those with relative impunity. You don't have to worry about hurts. If they're diabetic and you give them an ambidextrose, that's not going to hurt them. If they're COPD or you give them some oxygen, that's not going to hurt them. If they are addicted to drugs and they're in an overdose state, you give them Narcan, that's not going to hurt them. Thiamine's certainly not going to hurt them. But flumazenil can, and here's the reason. For some reason, when people like to party or kill themselves, they like to take an overdose of tricyclic antidepressants. So they'll take a handful of amitriptyline, throw them in their mouth. And then, you know, Valium should go good with that. You'll take a handful of Valium or Xanax and take it. So now they come in and they are having altered mental status. Think about it, overdose of tricyclics is typically going to cause seizures, right? It should cause seizures. Valium, that they also overdosed on, treats seizures. So they pre-treated the seizures that they were going to get, right? And now here you come along as the provider and you give them flumazenil, block out the Valium, and what's going to happen? They're going to start seizing. And now you're chasing your tail. So you give them flumazenil and they start seizing, now you got to give them Valium. You give them flumazenil because they're unconscious. So the flumazenil is a relative contraindication. You can get burned giving that. You can't really get burned giving the others. Did I make that clear? For some reason I felt like I was floundering. So in most places you can just say, give them a coma cocktail, and they'll know. But just so you know, it's 100 milligrams of thiamine, it's an amp of dextrose. And it's an amp of Narcan. You think about the flumazenil. Think about it. Is there a chance they've also overdosed on tricyclics? Do they have a history of depression and maybe they have tricyclics? Do they have clinical findings? Clinical findings of a tricyclic overdose would be tachycardia with a widened QRS. If they have a really wide QRS and tachycardia, maybe they did overdose on tricyclics. Perhaps romazicon or flumazenil is not the way to go. So after all that's done, you still got to do an exam. Don't forget that. I've seen so many students, interns, residents, fellows, they come in and man, they go right down the mnemonics perfectly, but they forget to do an exam. You have to do an exam on everybody. For one thing, you may uncover things, and for another thing, it's fraud. If you bill for doing a history and a physical and you don't actually do the physical, that's fraud. And that's a bad thing too. You'd be amazed sometimes at what you'll find on the physical exam that actually tells you what's going on. So this is a mnemonic that I made up. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, P. This is the workup. This has saved my butt so many times. You won't see this anywhere else. I wrote it, I made it up. But this has saved my butt so many times. And I've had PAs who are out in the field now who've come back and said, man, that mnemonic really saved my butt. So these are all the things that you might want to order on somebody who's comatose. All right? You don't have to order them all. You can order them all. Nobody is going to come behind you and say, man, you really screwed that up. It's your own opinion of the situation. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, P. Have you guys heard this before? Good. A. I always start at the top and work my way down. A is an ABG. You might want to get an ABG on these people. You can test their acidosis versus their alkalosis. You can see if they're ventilating. You can check their PO2, their PCO2. Frequently, you can just get a pulse ox because a blood gas actually kind of hurts. So you could just get a pulse ox and see if their saturation is good. And don't forget you can get a VBG. You don't have to get an arterial blood gas. You can also get a venous blood gas. So it's going to have a little bit higher CO2. It's going to have a little bit worse of a pH. But it's still helpful. You don't have to stick them in the artery. Lord knows it's a horrible thing if you stick them in the artery for an ABG and then it turns out they're having an MI. Now you want to come behind and give them streptokinase or one of the thrombolytics, and you can't really do it because they got a hole in their radial artery. The other A is ammonia, and this is the one that has saved my butt so many times. This particular part of the mnemonic, the A for ammonia. We got a lot of alcoholics out there. And alcoholics get liver disease, and they get hepatic encephalopathy. What that is, the liver's just not working good, and their ammonia levels get way too high, and it makes them act goofy. So if you get somebody who's just acting goofy or they're comatose or there's just something weird about them, think about getting an ammonia level. Because if you don't think about it because it's in the mnemonic, you're probably not going to remember it. And it's kind of embarrassing if 2 days from now after they've been admitted, somebody comes down and says, man, if you would have just gotten an ammonia level, you would have known. That's a big part of the mnemonic, the A for ammonia. The B. B stands for blood alcohol. They may just be drunk. Maybe that's all that's going on. Remember that most alcohols you can smell on the breath, but not vodka. If they overdosed or intoxicated themselves on vodka, you may not be able to smell that on the breath. Now that I've told you that, you know how to go out and drink the night before class and come in without anybody knowing about it. Blood alcohol is something you probably want to get if there's a chance that this is the reason that they're having ultimate symptoms. C. C stands for a whole bunch of things. The CBC, you want to see if they're anemic. With the CBC, you can assess their white count. You can assess their shift, see if they have evidence of sepsis or viral disease or bacterial infection. Their chemistries. Hyponatremia, sodium of 110, is certainly going to make somebody act goofy. Other electrolyte abnormalities can really, really make people act goofy. The CO is carbon monoxide. If they've got carbon monoxide poisoning, that can be bad, and it can certainly make them act goofy. You don't want to miss a chest x-ray. You can just almost always get a chest x-ray. You just never know what you're going to find. You may find a huge pneumonia, you may find a pneumothorax. A standard chest x-ray is just almost a standard routine thing for ER patients, and especially for an admit patient. Cultures, you're going to get blood cultures, urine cultures, potentially. It's not going to help you at all, but if this patient gets admitted and it turns out they're septic or they have endocarditis, it's going to help somebody else later down the road that you've got cultures in the ER and they're starting to grow something. CT is CAT scan of the head. Here's what I tell you about that. That's a very, very expensive test. And many times you'll just jump right on it and say, okay, get a CT. You're going to add to order all these things and add a CT of the head. That's not the way it should be. The way it should be is, let's wait and see what else comes back. And if there's nothing else helping us figure out what's going on, then we'll get a CAT scan. The reason is, I tell you that is, if you just order everything and say, do it all, and while they're off in CAT scan, their sodium comes back at 111. Well, that's why they're goofy, because their sodium's 111. You just wasted a CT, you gave them needless radiation. They got a huge bill that they don't really need to have, That's why if I ask you, do you want a CT of the head, your answer should be, well, let's wait and see what else pops up. The D, there's two things for D. One is drug screening. We're just going to get their urine and their blood. We're going to look for all the drugs that we've used, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, opiates, blah, 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 blah. We're also going to do a Tylenol level to see if they've overdosed on Tylenol. We'll also do a aspirin level to see if they've overdosed on aspirin. Drug levels is if you know what the patient's on. So say they're on Dilantin. Probably going to want to get a Dilantin level, because if they're toxic on Dilantin, that will certainly make them act goofy. If they're on phenobarbital, then a phenobarbital level. It's a whole bunch of medicines they can be on that you need to get a level of. E. Got to get an EKG. As I told you earlier, tricyclic overdose typically presents with EKG findings of tachycardia and widened QRS. You can also see the bat wing T waves that go along with subarachnoid bleeding. You can diagnose other dysrhythmias just by getting an EKG. Maybe they're having a heart attack. You can find that. The F, that stands for female. If it's a female of childbearing age, just go ahead and get a pregnancy test. You want to know, are you taking care of one patient or two patients? And the last one is P, you need to get a urinalysis. You never know what you're going to find in the urinalysis. P also stands for PB, in case it's a kid who's been eating lead. He's been eating lead paint off the walls, and he's got overdose of lead. You want to get a lead level. Very rare, but at least it's in the mnemonic and it lives on. All right? Everybody got that? Everybody comfortable with the workup? Okay. Let's work up this lady. She's an 85-year-old lady from the nursing home. Her nurse who takes care of her every single day says the Martha just is not acting right. She seems to be acting different. Remember, she's coming from the nursing home. She seems to be acting different. To you, she's just another demented little old lady from the nursing home. Beautiful, pleasant little old lady from the nursing home. So let's go through it. You want to get an ABG on her? Who would get an ABG? Nobody. Who would get an ammonia? A couple of people. Who would get a blood alcohol? So there's some people who would. How about a CBC? A lot of people. Chemistries? Carbon monoxide. One person for carbon monoxide. Chest X-ray. You gotta get a chest X-ray. Blood cultures. That's kind of a, let's look at her temperature, let's look at her vital signs, but it's certainly not wrong to get a culture on her. How about a CAT scan of her head? Now what if you found that she had a flask of whiskey under her pillow? Now the blood alcohol is probably a good idea. What if you found that she fell and hit her head going to the bathroom? Now the CAT scan is a good idea. But from what I've presented to you so far, we're doing good. How about a drug screen? You just want to go ahead and screen her for cocaine and marijuana and methamphetamine? Nobody raised their hand. I wouldn't, but it's all right. How about drug levels? We don't know her med list. You just want to go ahead and get a Dilantin level and a phenobarbital level and a DIPS level. I mean, some people would. I would not. That just seems to be marking down the wrong hallway. But if after you get her medication list and you see what she's on, then you can start ordering levels for the lab, for the meds that she's on. How about an EKG? Yeah, everybody should get an EKG on her. How about a pregnancy test? Actually, I have a friend who got a pregnancy test on an 80-something-year-old lady. Medicare got in big trouble. It's called padding the bill. There's no way this 80-year-old lady was pregnant. I'm just padding the bill. It was a Medicare patient. It didn't turn out to be a huge deal. It just, as you're calling out all your things, make sure you don't call out a pregnancy test on somebody that doesn't need a pregnancy test. And how about a lead level? Anybody want a lead level? All right. Switch patients. This is a new patient. This is a 19-year-old female who's found unconscious in her apartment. She's a known IV drug user. Okay? What's an ABG? 4 people. How about an ammonia level? 4 people. Blood alcohol. Most people. CBC. Chemistries. Carbon monoxide. See, 1 person, 2 people say yes. Chest X-ray. What if she's pregnant? You can always do an X-ray with a shield, just put a pelvic shield on it. Don't ever let that stop you, just put a pelvic shield on it if you want to fix this. How about blood cultures? How many people do blood cultures? Yeah, you should be raising your hand for blood cultures because she's an IV drug user. She could have endocarditis. You can listen for a murmur, you can look for other signs and symptoms of endocarditis, but blood culture is probably a good way to go. How about a CAT scan of the head?
Where was she found?
Let's wait and see. That's what we should say. Let's wait and see what pops up. How about a drug screen? Yeah, everybody should get a drug screen. How about drug levels? You know anything about it? Just want to indiscriminately start ordering levels. EKG? Pregnancy test? Urinalysis? Okay. Here's your results. You know what you're looking at. This is the way charts are written up in the family practices in the ER, like this. So your sodium is here, potassium is here, chloride, bicarb, glucose, BUN, and creatinine. That's typically the way it's written. If you got somebody with a BUN of 80 or 90 that looks like it could be a glucose, you want to label it BUN. So that, because some people will put the glucose up here and the BUN down here. But it's always sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarb. And then the other stick figure that we always use is this one. It's WBCs, hemoglobin, hematocrit, platelets. So there's your chemistries. There's the stick figures that keep me away from the board. Any questions about that? There's her results. There's her blood gas. Some people didn't want a blood gas, so if you didn't want a blood gas, don't look. You didn't order it. There's her UA. And tell me what's wrong. I've given you enough to know what's wrong with you. The lady? What's that?
She's pregnant.
She's pregnant. That doesn't make you alter mental status.
She's acidotic.
Right, what's that? She's acidotic. Who said that? She's definitely acidotic. Did you order blood gas?
I saw the bicarb.
Okay.
Does that count?
She's acidotic. She's definitely acidotic. Don't forget the gap. You guys know what the gap is? The gap is the difference between the sodium, basically the positives, sodium and potassium, the difference between these two and these two, chloride and CO2. Potassium is always about 4, so we just cancel out the potassium, don't even look. So the difference between this and these two. What is her gap? 35? It's about 35. Normal gap is 12. So remember, this is how you do it. Sodium minus the bicarb plus the chloride. Normal is about 12. Labs are getting better and better at finding chloride, so the normal gap is starting to get less and less. So as we looked at her ABG, we saw that she was acidotic. And we looked at this, she's got a metabolic acidosis. And she's got a, we did the gap, right? Following me, we did the gap. So she's got an anion gap acidosis. So what does she have? I used to say something really clever about this, but I can't remember. So there's a differential for things that cause an anion gap acidosis. There's regular metabolic acidosis, and then there's anion gap metabolic acidosis. She's got an anion gap. So in the textbooks they have this mnemonic, it's Elm Park. It's a horrible mnemonic, don't write that one down. This is one called Mud Pile Cat. It's fair. I used to use a Mud Piles cat. muddy cat. This is the one I use now, mud pile cats. So I'll tell you, today you need to memorize this. You don't have to do it right now, but before you wake up tomorrow, you should have this mnemonic memorized. Because you're going to get pimped on this your whole year of rotations. Because all the docs and all the PAs have memorized this, and they want to know that you memorized it too. It's really not that useful, but you just got to know it. So what is cool about this is the mnemonic is mud pile cats. We have a patient with altered mental status with an anion gap metabolic acidosis, anion gap positive. We know that she's got one of these things. She's got one of these things that comes under mud pile cats. To me, that's pretty exciting. M. M stands for methanol overdose or metformin. Remember that metformin, one of it is an anti-diabetes drug. One of its side effects is it causes lactic acidosis, and lactic acid can cause anion gap metabolic acidosis. Methanol. How are we going to test for that? This is typically the homeless person that's been drinking Sterno or wood alcohol, trying to get drunk. You can get a methanol level, but it won't be back until Thursday typically. So there's a way to test for methanol. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. The U stands for uremia. How are we going to test for that? Just look at her BUN and creatinine. Her BUN and creatinine were normal, so she does not have uremia. The D, CKA. How are we going to test for that? We've already tested for that, right? She doesn't have high blood sugar. She doesn't have ketones in her urine. She's got the acidosis that goes along with TKA, and she didn't have any of the other stuff that goes along with it. She didn't have ketones in her urine either. But TKA is in the differential, one of the things we're going to look for. P. Formaldehyde, which is an old anesthetic that nobody ever uses anymore, and fenformin, which is an old diabetes medicine that nobody uses anymore, but they still want you to know it for the mnemonic. I don't know. I would say, how are we going to test for it, but it doesn't matter. You can't even get these drugs anymore. You still need to know it for your mnemonic. I. INH, that's isoniazid. How are we going to test for that? That's a hard one. That's the drug we use for tuberculosis. You get a chest x-ray, and almost everybody here said get a chest x-ray, and you can look for signs on the x-ray of tuberculosis, which is little goobers at the apices. But if you don't see goobers at the apices, and you don't have suspicion that they have tuberculosis and being treated with INH and then overdose on INH, it's really going to be hard. Iron, how are we going to test for that? You need an iron level and a TIBC. That's how you do it. You get an iron level and a TIBC, a total iron binding capacity. If the iron level is greater than the TIBC, they have an iron level. When I was an intern long ago, we used to treat them with deferoxamine, it's a chelating agent. So we'd have a kid that came in, most typically ate his mommy's prenatal vitamins or diet. So the kids overdosed on iron. We just give them deferoxamine, a shot in the butt, and then watch them the next time they pee. If it came out what's called a vin rosé, kind of a red urine, then yes, in fact, they did have iron in their blood, and we've chelated it, and we need to continue. We just keep giving them shots until they quit peeing pink. Now we know better. We know just to get an iron in their TIBC and clean it. L. This is the fly in the ointment. Remember I said that we know she's got one of these things. That's really cool. That's exciting. But one of these things is lactic acidosis. There's a whole bunch of things that cause lactic acidosis, like sepsis and bowel ischemia and bowel infarct. There's so many things that can cause lactic acidosis, and now it's opened up a whole new spider's web. You can get a lactic acid level, but if that comes back positive, now you're kind of down the rabbit hole looking for what's causing this. E. E is ethylene glycol. This is what is in antifreeze. And this is typically, again, the homeless person, the alcoholic who's looking to get drunk, so they just drink a bunch of ethylene glycol, drink a bunch of antifreeze. And it gets them pretty drunk, but it also will kill them. don't know if the slide's coming up, it shows you how to do it. So how are we going to test for ethylene glycol? Anybody know the answer to this? You got to get what's called a serum osmolality. You got to do that. You order an osmolality. So basically, you order an osmolality, and the lab says, okay, and they call you back in 10 minutes, and they say it's 300. That's not good enough. There's no way they tested it. There's two different kinds of osmolality. There's a calculated osmolality, and then there's a measured osmolality. The calculated is 2 times the sodium plus the glucose over 18 plus BUN over 2.8 plus the ETOH over 4.6. So when you ordered a osmolality, the lab just plugged those numbers in. 2 times the sodium plus glucose over 18, BUN over 2.8, ETOH over 4.6. They just plugged in and said it's 300. So now you get nasty with the lab. You say, no, I don't want a measured. I don't want it calculated. I actually want you to measure it. They are upset because it's a hard thing to do. There's 2 ways to do it. One is boiling point, and the other is freezing point. And it has to be done by freezing point. Boiling point won't do it. Freezing point is by far the hardest way to do it. So you've got to call the lab and say, thank you for calculating it. I could have done that myself. I need you to measure it. And it's got to be measured by freezing point depression. They are ticked off the sheet. But let's say they do it. They do the freezing point depression. And the measure comes out to be 450. Whereas when you did the calculation, it came out to be 300. So calculated is 300, measured is 450. That's called an osmolar gap. The gap of 150, right? Difference of 150. The things that cause that are methanol and ethylene glycol. Also, before I forget, ethylene glycol is the active ingredient in antifreeze, and that's typically where you're going to see it, the people who drink antifreeze. People who make antifreeze got smart and they put fluorescein stain in their antifreeze. You know, the same thing that you put in somebody's eye to look for a corneal abrasion. They put that in the antifreeze. So the reason they do that is when you bring your car into the auto mechanic and say, I think I'm leaking antifreeze, they'll just take it into the garage and put a black light under it and see if there's any fluorescence, so they know where it's leaking. By the same token, if you drink antifreeze, your urine is going to glow in the dark under the black light because it's got the fluorescence. It's pretty cool way to do it. And if somebody's pimping you on it, be sure and say it. So the C is cyanide. Remember, we're back to mud, pile caps, things that cause anion gap acidosis. C is cyanide. How are we going to test for that? Anybody know? Remember, it kills really, really fast. There's only one way to really tell quickly, and that's to smell their breath. Your breath will smell like bitter almonds. Only about 1/3 of the people in here right now will be able to smell the bitter almonds. Bitter almonds. So you get a patient who is comatose, looking like they're about to die, and you smell their breath and it smells like bitter almonds. You're a cyanide patient, and you've got about 3 minutes to treat them and they're going to die. You got a patient who is comatose and you smell their breath and it smells like juicy fruit gum, it's going to be DKA. It's the ketones. So don't forget about that. Bitter almonds. A, alcoholic ketoacidosis. It's important that I tell you that alcohol itself does not cause ketoacidosis. We're talking about ketoacidosis as a result of somebody being an alcoholic. Rather than spend their money at McDonald's or Burger King, they just buy some more whiskey. So they stay drunk all the time. They're malnourished, they're dehydrated, and therefore they're ketotic. It's more like a starvation ketosis. Alcohol itself does not cause anion gap acidosis. Methanol does, ethylene glycol does, alcohol does not, isopropyl does not. Isopropyl causes an osmolar gap, but not a metabolic, not an anion. Also, A is aspirin. How we diagnose that? You just get an aspirin level. That's easy. And you can get that back quickly. You know the number for aspirin? I've told you about the magic of 140, right? No? Oh my God, where have you guys been? To me, this is a really magic one. 140. If you got somebody who was overdosed on Tylenol, remember Tylenol is everywhere, man. It's in every over-the-counter sleep aid you can get. I mean, Tylenol is just coupled with cold medicines, cough medicines. Tylenol is everywhere. If you got somebody that you think has overdosed on Tylenol, you need to get a Tylenol level. And unfortunately, you need to get it 4 hours after they ingest it. If you can get it 4 hours after they ingest it and the level is 140, they're toxic. They need to be treated. If you can't get to them 4 hours, then it's kind of out the window. But if you know how much they took, if their husband or wife comes in and says, I found the bottle and this is how much he took, you can calculate how much he took versus how much he weighs. And if it's 140 milligrams per kilogram, they're toxic and they need to be in the hospital and get treated. And the treatment is, remember the treatment for Tylenol overdose? Euphemist, N-acetylcysteine. Guess what the dosage is? 140 milligrams per kilogram for the first dose. And after that, it's 70 milligrams per kilogram, 17 more doses. 140 is a pretty good number to remember for aspirin. If you do an aspirin level and it's 140, it's probably going to be toxic as well. That's not dogmatic like it is for Tylenol. For Tylenol, let's go. 140 is the magic. Where else? T. T stands for toluene. That's the active ingredient in paint and whiteout. So these people that sniff paint, they're getting high from the toluene. And the toluene causes anion gap metabolic acidosis. Gold paint has more toluene than anything else. Gold is the preferred color. The second preferred color is silver. If you go to Walmart or Ace Hardware and look, the gold paint's always sold out and the silver's almost sold out because the gold's got the most toluene in it. And the way they present typically, the way they do it is they get a brown paper bag and they'll spray the gold paint in the bag and then they'll sniff it. So they're going to get flecks of gold all along their nose and their lips and their beard and their mustache if they got facial hair. And that's how you're going to know. And if they sold out of gold, then you're going to see silver flecks of paint on their nose and their mouth. I think it's gotten where now at Walmart, if you try to buy spray paint, they make sure you're over 18.
And duct tape.
And it's locked up.
What's that? And it's locked up? All right. S. Starvation ketosis. This relates to the alcoholic ketoacidosis. This is just somebody who's been on a horrible, horrible diet. Like they've been fasting for days and days and days. They haven't been eating, they haven't been drinking, they're ketotic. That can cause an increased anion gap acidosis. And you should be able to diagnose that pretty easy. You're going to get the history from them that they've been on a horrible diet, or their family's going to be saying, yeah, he's been trying to lose weight forever, and he's been on this stupid diet. So that's how you do it. All right, any questions about that? That is how we work them up and how we figure out what they got. This is a little blip on methanol. Don't forget about, here, the osmolar gap. Calculated versus measured. Remember I went through that earlier. You can measure it and get a number, or you can calculate it and get a number. If there's a difference between them, it's called the osmolar gap. And there's the formula. Show it up a little later. All right. I'm supposed to go till 5. I got about 20 minutes left. Can we just keep going and then come home? Well, we can take a break and come back at 3:15 and let traffic get big. All right, here we go. So we're going to go back through the list and talk about each one and how we're going to treat it. Methanol. You guys know how to treat a methanol overdose? First, how do we diagnose methanol overuse?
Osmolar gas.
Osmolar gap. Remember, you can do an osmolar gap measured versus calculated. Pink, is that all right? I can't remember if this is on the PowerPoint. Methanol. We're talking about somebody's overdose on methanol. Remember, they have an osmolar gap, calculated versus measured. We know they've overdosed on methanol. How do we treat them? It's important for you to remember that methanol itself is not toxic. It's not going to hurt them at all. But it breaks down into formic acid. The methanol breaks down to formic acid, and that is toxic. So our first aim of treatment is to prevent this from becoming this. The way that methanol goes to formic acid is via alcohol dehydrogenase. So methanol uses alcohol dehydrogenase to form formic acid. Are you with me? So what we want to do is tie up all our alcohol dehydrogenase. The way we do that is we give them alcohol. Alcohol preferentially will tie up all the alcohol dehydrogenase. There's not any left to take the methanol to formic acid. So you with me? We gotta prevent the methanol from being converted to formic acid. By doing that, the way to do that is to tie up all the alcohol dehydrogenase. And the way to tie that up is with alcohol. So how do we give them alcohol? Well, if you're working in Broken Toe, Oklahoma, you go to the liquor store, you get some whiskey, and you just have to start drinking whiskey or beer. How much? You want them to get blood alcohol level of about 150, 1.5 times stronger. If you're working at OU or any of the metro hospitals, you can order an alcohol drip. And you just titrate a drip to where the blood alcohol level is 150. You see why we're doing it? You see what we're doing and why we're doing it. The question should pop up, what about all that methanol? We still got all that methanol, right? You got to go to hemodialysis. So you go to hemodialysis to dialyze off the methanol. Where people really screw up is they forget that when you go to hemodialysis, so you got the patient on an alcohol drip, and you're taking them to hemodialysis to get rid of methanol. The dialysis is also taking off the alcohol. So you have to increase your drip. You have to get them more drip. Because the hemodialysis is going to take off the alcohol too. And if it takes off the alcohol, the remaining methanol will start to go into the alcohol dehydrogenase and forming formic acid. So you haven't done them any favors. There's a drug that you can use instead of alcohol. It's called fomepizole. Fomepizole does the exact same thing that alcohol does. It ties up the alcohol dehydrogenase, but it's very, very expensive. It's very expensive. It's cheaper just to get some whiskey. Right? And while we're on this street, we'll just convert, I don't want to write another whatever we do. Methanol, substitute methanol for ethylene glycol. So you've got a patient who's been drinking antifreeze. Ethylene glycol also is not toxic. Its byproduct is hippuric acid. Hippuric acid is what's toxic, and it goes from ethylene glycol to hippuric acid via alcohol dehydrogenase. So the treatment is still the same. You still got to get them on an alcohol drip, you got to get them drunk, take them to hemodialysis. All right, any questions? No questions? Moving on. This is the fomepizole. Real expensive. It does exactly what alcohol does. It just ties up the alcohol dehydrogenase. You can't really put alcohol in an IV bag. It's a cool picture. Although I know a guy who went on a cruise like this. He told people that he was diabetic and needed IV saline in case he had problems. He told the cruise ship that. They brought bags and bags and bags of vodka that were inside, so sodium bags, no one say that. He got away with it. In his cabin, he had it hanging from his cabin, and people would come in with a Coke and just open up the IV. It's pretty ingenious, really. All right, uremia. We're talking about the treatments now. Uremia, we diagnose that by seeing that they're being or creatinine or elevated. We're treating that by putting them in the hospital. Let somebody else take care of it. The hospitalists, the internists, they can take care of it. DKA, you got to take care of them. They got to get them into the hospital. A frequent test question that is on med school test, PA stat test, boards, emergency test. So you can only pick one thing to give them for DKA. What would it be? The answer is fluids. It's not insulin, it's not potassium, it's fluids, fluids, fluids. You do want to give insulin, you do want to give potassium and all that other stuff. But the main thing is fluids. Do you know why we're giving potassium? Insulin causes the potassium. That's partially true. But you also got an osmotic diuresis. You got all the sugar coming out and it's sucking all the potassium out with it. So the sugar in the urine is sucking potassium with it. The potassium that was previously intracellular is now extracellular and it gets sucked out. So when you start treating the acidosis, the hydrogen ions come back and push the potassium ions back into the cell, and now they're hypokalemia, so they really need potassium. That's another lecture another time. I love to do that on the course. All right, INH. How do we treat that? I wouldn't expect anybody to do this. This is a mnemonic. Split C. S-P-L-I-T-C. Split C. So here's the things it stands for. And first, what is it? This is all the, not all the things, but most of the things that you might expect to give IV bicarb for. So you want to give an alkaline solution to a patient. Split C. The C stands for salicylates. If we're to ask for an overdose, bicarb can do it. The P stands for phenobarbital. Overdose on phenobarbital, give them an IV drip of bicarb. The L stands for lithium. Lithium overdose, we need bicarb. The I stands for INH, isoniazid, which is what we're talking about. If they overdose on isoniazid, they need a bicarb drip. Stop there for a second. Say you've got a patient who has overdosed on isoniazid and they're seizing, and you can't get them to stop seizing. You can give them bicarb, it doesn't help. You can give them Valium, it doesn't help. Give them Xanax, it doesn't help. It's probably never going to happen to you, but it's on the test always. You know what you got to give them? Nobody? I didn't think anybody would know. I'd be surprised. Vitamin B6, pyridoxine. I can't tell you why. I don't know the pathophysiology, but it's been on just about every test I've ever taken about emergency medicine. And it's something you just got to tuck away in your brain. They've overdosed on INH, isoniazid, vitamin B6 is what you got to give them for the C. Okay, so now we're back to the mnemonic split C. Salicylates, phenobarb, lithium, INH. The T is tricyclates. So if you're only going to remember one thing from today, from my lecture today, this is it. It's bicarb for tricyclates. Okay? If you have somebody who overdosed on amitriptyline, Elavil, any of the tricyclic antidepressants, and they are in B-fib, you can shock all day long, but until you give them bicarb, they're not going to get that. If you got somebody who's overdosed on tricyclics and they're having seizures, you can give them Valium and Xanax and phenobarb and Dilantin all day, but they're not going to get better until you give them bicarb. Bicarb is truly the panacea for anything that goes wrong with a tricyclic overdose. All right? That's the only thing you're going to remember that. The C in split C is cocaine. If you got a cocaine overdose, you want to treat them with a bicarb solution. You know how else you treat cocaine? Usually they come in with tachycardia and hypertension. This is way off topic, but this is we're almost done. This is always on the test too. They're hypertensive. And I had a PA student recently that said, well, you got to give them a beta blocker. Beta blocker will kill them. Because cocaine is an alpha agonist and a beta agonist. So you come along and you give them a beta blocker, propranolol, and you block the beta. Now they have what's called unopposed alpha. And the blood pressure skyrockets and they stroke out. So that's always a test question, and that's something you just want to always remember. Do not give a beta blocker to somebody who's overdosed on cocaine. You gotta give them a alpha and a beta, like love it. You gotta block them both. All right, so there's the mnemonic: salicylates, phenobarb, lithium, INH, tricyclics, cocaine. Now we're down to ethylene glycol. We've already talked about that. We're going to give them either alcohol or fomepizole to tie up the alcohol dehydrogenase. Now we're down to cyanide. Anybody know how to treat cyanide overdose? The mnemonic I learned, I didn't write this, but somebody taught me, it's try, leave it up to fate. Try, leave it up to fate. Where it stands for amyl nitrite, sodium nitrite, sodium thiosulfate. Like this. Try, leave it up to fate. It's amyl nitrite, sodium nitrite, sodium thiosulfate. You don't have to remember that. You just have to say, give me a cyanide kit. Give me a little cyanide kit. But that's what's in it. Amyl nitrite, sodium nitrite, and sodium thiosulfate. Try, leave it up. All right, we're almost done. Alcoholic ketoacidosis, you just got to admit them, get them tuned up, put them on IV fluids, let somebody else take care of them. Aspirin. How are we going to take care of somebody that's overdosed on aspirin? Remember, we've done an aspirin level, and their level is over 140. That's not dogma like Tylenol, but let's say they're at, well, it's 140, they need to be admitted. Do you know how they die? How do people with aspirin overdose die? They get horrible pulmonary edema. My first death as a doctor, out of residency, my first death was a 17-year-old girl who overdosed on aspirin. She died of pulmonary edema. I'll never forget it, but that's how they die. So how do we treat them? You guys all know this. Bicarb. You know, no class before has ever said bicarb. They just let it go. But yeah, bicarb. Give them bicarb. All right. Starvation ketosis. You know how to treat that? Cheeseburgers. Just give them some food. That's all. That's all. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
With the starvation ketosis, do you have to worry about refeeding syndrome?
Refeeding syndrome?
Yeah.
I guess a little bit, but that's not, as an ER doc, no. No, I let somebody else worry about it. Any other questions? All right, stay safe out there.